Hi everyone, this is Clarissa. I'm with the 626 Foodettes, and joining me is Christy, who's my partner, and Calvin Ho, who's a doctoral student in sociology at UCLA. And Calvin is joining us here today to just talk about what is the 626. Calvin, I know you wrote a blog post following an LA Times article featuring the 626 and just, the recent night market. Could you go in a little bit about why you were a little bit ticked off at that article?
Well, I think the reason I was ticked off at that article, it didn't really start with that article. When I first saw the video that the Fung brothers produced a few months ago, that music video promoting the 626 as sort of in second generation Asian American foodie paradise, my first reaction was, hey, this is fantastic. I'm from the 626, quote unquote, and I think it's fantastic that someone's making something like positive about our community. But there was something about that video that made me a little uncomfortable. And I couldn't really figure out what that was until the LA Times article came out. And it highlighted the things that this 626 movement, quote unquote, wanted to highlight. And it occurred to me when I read that article that in trying to brand the 626 as this sort of playground for second generation Asian Americans, we are really forgetting that the region is very much diverse in terms of race, in terms of class, and not everyone is going to identify with that image of the San Gabriel Valley that they're trying to produce. And if we let this portrayal of the San Gabriel Valley become sort of a dominant narrative, then people are just going to forget that a huge proportion of the population is of Hispanic origin, for example, or that
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of immigrants in the neighborhood, and a lot of working class people who can't necessarily afford to live the kind of lifestyle that you see in that music video.
Right. So, how do you think this area should be defined, or should anything be a symbol for it, or should it just do you think this was a good idea to have the 626 night market kind of embody the San Gabriel Valley or be the epitome of the San Gabriel Valley?
Well, I don't necessarily see the 626 night market as the epitome of the San Gabriel Valley. I think it highlights one aspect of it that's really great. But
Mm-hmm.
in highlighting that, we have to remember, we have to constantly keep in mind that that's not all there is to it. And that is one aspect that's definitely flourishing. I love the fact that we have lots of people who are involved in the food business who are creating really great new things, but this isn't all that there is to the San Gabriel Valley. It's a multifaceted region like any other, and it can't be defined by its like food culture alone.
Can you kind of elaborate just on what specific details of the article? Because I know it was front page, I believe, on the LA Times. It did create a lot of buzz. What specific facets really did you find that were not accurate at all?
I wouldn't necessarily say that any of it was inaccurate. I just found that a lot of the quotes that they pulled from people had a lot of very problematic assumptions behind them and a lot of very problematic views on the world. For example, I believe the journalist quoted Eileen Shu, I believe she's involved with the 626 night market, and she said something along the lines of, we're not from China, we speak English. And I thought that was indicative of a distancing that they're trying to produce between themselves as second generation Asian Americans in the San Gabriel Valley and the immigrant community. And this isn't necessarily bad per se, but it is sort of playing into the idea that, oh, we are more American, we speak English, we are more assimilated, and we are different. When in reality, the neighborhood and the region is shared by many different groups with who are different in terms of their time in the U.S., how many generations they've been in the U.S., what language they speak.
Right, and I know your piece, got a lot of community response. I mean, I just saw people tweeting back at you.
Mhm.
How did people react to your piece? I mean, you were one of the first people to kind of speak out against the whole 626 movement, or as they call it, the 626 movement.
Most of the responses I got were actually pretty positive. People seemed to like the idea that I was questioning the values and the assumptions behind the 626 movement. I did get some negative responses, mostly from one anonymous commenter on my blog, and I haven't really gotten any like official or sort of responses with names on them from people who are more directly involved when producing this sort of media. But I get the sense from the tweets that I got back and from the comments on my blog that people were like, "Hey, okay, it's good to question the assumptions behind this type of movement."
And if you don't mind me asking, what was that negative comment about, or was it just like a troll?
It seemed to be just a troll
Okay.
saying that the 626 movement is pro boba, not anti anything else. And my argument to that is you can be sort of it's implicitly anti something else sometimes. You don't necessarily have to be openly anti something. Not to compare them to white supremacists, of course, but the whole concept behind white supremacy as a term is that they're not anti anything else, they're just pro white. That's just an
Right.
extreme example of the kind of reasoning that was being used here. But I mean, that's just one troll, and I don't think that's indicative of the movement as a whole.
Right. And I remember meeting you at the second 626 night market. I know you're kind of against how this whole thing is being framed, but are you, supportive of the vendors, of what they're doing, how they're just getting businesses out there and generating a sense of community? Or are you just against the entire movement in general?
I wouldn't necessarily say I'm against the movement. I'm actually like quite supportive of Asian American
Right.
media and the sort of positive images that they're trying to bring. It's just that I think that we need to be more critical in our development of these new ideas. And I am very much in support of the 626 night market. I blog about it all the time. I intend to go to the next one. I loved the second event. I wasn't there for the
Right.
first event, but I love the second event.
Yeah, the second event was great. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. That's all we have now for this week. Next week, we're planning on speaking to some of the organizers of the market, so that will be a good perspective. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and
Thanks,
have a
guys.
good evening.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.